Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my continued Doctor Who 39 Seasons ranking. It's probably going to be part 3 at the start of this video, and we might go into part 4 as well, as we are going to be doing the second third of this ranking, which will cover the middle 13 seasons, 26 through 14. As a reminder, parts 1 and 2, as I'm probably going to do a 6-part video series, 7 including the introduction. Parts 1 and 2 would have covered the bottom 13, numbers 39 through 27. I believe I'm going to do 7, then 6 at a time, so it should be 39 to 33, and then 32 to 27 for parts 1 and 2 respectively, and then this time part 3 should be numbers 26 to 20, and then part 4, 19 to 14, covering the middle 13, and then parts 5 and 6 will cover 13 to 1. Overall, with 13 through 7 in part 5, and part 6, 6 to 1, to basically the top 6. And that would pretty much be it with a full... I'll go through the full list of the ranking at the very end of that, but in the meantime, whilst I usually read out the rankings so far at the end of each video and at the start of the next one, before we carry on, I'm just going to do them in text form at the end of each part of where we're up to. So I'll just do them in text form at the end of each video and at the start of the next one, and then each one will get updated until we get to the final ranking, which will have a read-through version and then a final text version as a final reminder at the end. Or to quote the 13th Doctor in Resolution, a final... Well, she said chance is the next word, but I'm going to say reminder. Anyway, so with that out of the way, let's continue with number 26. Number 26. Speaking of the 13th Doctor, she's back. It hasn't been long since we talked about Series 12. Well, technically I'm recording this part and the next part on Sunday the 14th of May, so actually it was yesterday for me. And for you guys watching this, it could have been a couple of days ago, depending on if you're watching these on first release or if you're watching them in order or in a binge watch. Point is, in terms of the listing, Series 12 was only recently just talked about at number 28. And now we're back to the 13th Doctor. But what could possibly be second best 13th Doctor? Could it be the much devised Series 11, which was just... for some people it wasn't quite as fulfilling, but for other people it was fine? Or is it Series 13, the experiments that, like with Trial of the Time Lord, didn't quite work, but fucking COVID got in the way of it, so put up with it? It's the one that was affected by fucking COVID. Fuck you, COVID! Series 13, or Season 39, aka Flux. Jodie Whittaker's third and final series, and the only series to have a one story over a whole season for the new series, although it is the second one following the Trial of a Time Lord, Season 23, which we touched upon. Fun fact, this is also the third series to be a multiple of 13. This is number 39 overall, as well as also 13 for the new series, since the classic series finished with 26, which was also a multiple of 13. So we've got 3 seasons of multiples of 13, and for the 2 classic series ones, 13 and 26, they are top tier material. So spoiler alert for later on this list, those are going to be very high on this list. I was hoping we'd get 3 for 3 with Series 13, Season 39. We'd have 3 multiple of 13s, top tier level. Even if it was still not as good as some of the new series ones, I would still also say in that top tier level. I was still hoping maybe this one could still just make it into top 10. It'd be the best of the Whittaker era, be the best one since, well, I'll tell you when we get to those spots on the ranking, but best one for a long time. Could it have done that? No. Sadly, Series 13, despite everything against it, just about makes it into top 26 territory. It just misses out on bottom third territory, the bottom 13. For now, because Series 14, Season 40 is on its way, so that's going to obviously bump up and bump down some stuff. But As of the 39 seasons, this one just barely makes it into the top 26. Series 13 was decent, however, there's only really 2 strong episodes in this one, War of the Sontarans and Village of the Angels. The others are just okay. Pretty good in some cases, but not really anything to get excited about. The main exciting talking points are those 2 individual episodes, or the story as a whole, this whole 6 parts, one single story. We got some really cool new characters like Swarm and Azure, Carvanista, and MPV of the series, Jericho. Oh yeah, Kevin McNally is fantastic. As well as some really cool new Sontarans, like the ones from War of the Sontarans, and the new actor playing him, as well as the return of Dan Starkey, of course. It's just a shame that not all of the scripts kind of work. The Halloween Apocalypse is a good, enjoyable first setup episode, but that's really what it is. It's a setup episode, and quite a few of its detractions come from how later episodes would handle what it set up and how it would explain all of it. Some of it doesn't even get entirely explained. Like, why is Azure in the Arctic and who is the guy with her? We don't quite understand that. Was that some sort of like division guy keeping an eye on her? In which case, why did she smash the thing? Some of these answers don't quite get explained very well, if at all. I can see Once Upon Time is going with what it wants to do, and it does some really good stuff with Vinder's backstory. By the way, he's another shout-out character, as is Belle, but sadly, it doesn't quite do it very well. I will give it this. Going back on rewatches, the Belle stuff is a lot better than on first viewing, because then it makes a lot of sense by the end. I thought this was more Brendan stuff from Essential Assignment, which literally didn't go anywhere. But on rewatches, it is a bit easier to see where it's going, and thank Gallifrey, it actually contributes something in the later episodes, as opposed to the Doctor seeing these things of Ireland in Essential Assignment for no reason. Yeah, that was stupid. So Once Upon a Time is slightly better on repeat viewings, but it's still a bit of a kooky episode. And then the last 2 are just, what? Survivors of the Flux spends half its time setting up the unit, doing the unit origin story. This would have been fine in a standalone episode if this was the usual 10 episodes. But for half of the penultimate episode of the series, nah, this isn't quite working. And why does the Grand Serpent have to be there after episode 3? He was fine for Vinder's backstory, but episodes 5 and 6, I don't get why he's here. The Vanquishers, I will say, is easily the strongest of Jodie Whittaker's 3 series finale individual episodes, excluding Power of the Doctor if I was counting that. But out of the 3 series finales, this is easily the strongest. But that's still not saying much, because it is still one of the weaker episodes of this series. It's just a bit of a mess. Fun, but a bit of a mess. Series 13 could have been a lot better. I really am interested to hear what could have been the series had it been the usual 10 episodes and Flux was more of an arc rather than a single 6-part story. I'm really interested to know what some of the writers brought on board had ideas for the stories, as well as what made it through. The Sontaran and Angel ones definitely would have been standalone stories, as would Legend of the Sea Devils, more of that soon, as would the Halloween episode, and possibly some of the finale stuff as well, some of the Survivors of the Flux stuff. So it'd be really interesting to find out what the 10 episodes ideas were planned for the original series before circumstances got in the way and it had to be cut down to 6, and it was made to be a single 6-part story, with some of those elements kept in or moved to a special. Thanks, fucking COVID. Fucking COVID. Fuck you, COVID. We could have had a really great series, and okay, it was still a decent series, and yeah, some of this blame does fall on the production team, but they were still hampered by real-life events, so fuck you, COVID, fuck you so hard. Oh, fuck, I hate that fucking pandemic. Hi, Nick from the future here, from when this ranking was originally filmed on the weekend of the 13th and 14th of May. This little segment is being filmed on the 30th. So, back when I recorded this part of the ranking, and I was talking about Series 13, I just went into a rant tangent for about a minute or two about fucking COVID. COVID kind of affected how the story would be structured and how the production would handle that. But the creative teams did decide to go down with this specific story, and those are the specific decisions. Chris Chibnall, he had too many ideas for Series 13. He had too much. Maybe it would have been better if it was 10 episodes as planned, but for 6 episodes, it was so much. There was too much going on. He really needed to streamline, especially since this was only going to be 6 episodes, that the episode count was already reduced. He had to streamline so much. He had to streamline, and unfortunately, he didn't do that. He made it even more packed than Series 12 had been, and in a shorter runtime space of 6 episodes, around 7 hours total, because episodes 2, 3, and 4 were about 55 to 60 minutes, and the other 3 were 50 minutes. But yeah, it's still not that great that a 6 to 7 hour series feels so bloated. Especially since episode 1 is basically just the setup. Episode 3 is the weird one, and episode 5 spends about a third of its runtime setting up Unit's backstory, just so that the Grand Serpent and the Sontarans can invade Earth. And then episode 6 has to put all of it together. And anyway, I just wanted to do this new bit to replace the tangent about COVID, and I was mostly blaming that, but other factors were at work here as well, but that is still the main one. I'll stand by that. But I didn't want it just to be me going on a tangent about that and kind of dismissing some of the other things. So back to me to continue discussing the series and the specials for this portion of the video. And the fucking pandemic doesn't just hamper Series 13, it also hampers the specials. So Eve of the Daleks is the first of the 2022 specials, and this was made because there wasn't really much time to do a much bigger story idea Chris Chibnall wanted to do. But if it wasn't for the fucking pandemic, there probably would have been more time to make Series 13. So, fuck you, pandemic. That being said, I actually really enjoy Eve of the Daleks. This latest era, especially Series 12 and 13, have been very effects heavy. And granted, that's probably been the show for a while, but it feels like there's been a lot of love towards the visual effects. Now, granted, the fucking pandemic probably had something to do with that for Series 13's, but it just felt like it was very obviously CG, and for quite a lot of it, and I wanted to go back to some practical effects and some practical sets. So Eve of the Daleks is a breath of fresh air for me in practicality terms. I also think it's a really good episode, full stop. I just find it quite fun. The side characters are interesting. Not the most amazing side characters, but they're decent, and the actors do a pretty good job with them. Legend of the Sea Devils, however... Oh god, what happened here? A weak script and hampered production. Okay, I really want to know what happened on the production of this one. Of course, the fucking pandemic had something to do with it, obviously. But, my goodness, what happened with this episode? This was just an absolute train wreck. My goodness. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. I gave it a pass in my review. I think I passed it at 6 out of 10, dropping it down to a 5 for the Series 13 specials ranking. But that being said, it's still a train wreck. Apart from the Phasmin stuff, that was really fun. And the Sea Devils design do look very much like the classic series ones, at least in terms of the head, but with a new Chinese pirate look, which is pretty cool. And also having the story set in, like, I think it was 18th century China, 19th century China with pirates. That's a really cool idea. That's a very fun story idea. It's just a shame it looks so shoddy. It's cut to hell in many scenes. It looks so shoddily made, and the fact it's 50 minutes makes me wonder if this was supposed to be 60 minutes, but they cut down some stuff, possibly the 13th Doctor's regeneration, if Power of the Doctor was a last-minute addition by request of the BBC. If this was the final story, then, oh god, what a terrible one to go on. I mean, it's no Twice Upon a Time, but still, what a bad one to go on. But, yeah, Legend of the Sea Devils is a massive disappointment. Thankfully, the Power of the Doctor more than makes up for it. Okay, it's not 100% perfect, but I had the best time watching the Doctor Who episode since Day of the Doctor. And it was such a fun ride, with all of the references and callbacks, but also a decent plot. Okay, the Bastard's Plan doesn't make an awful lot of sense, and it's quite all over the place. and there's a lot of plot holes, but it's still a fun, engaging one as opposed to what Legend of the Sea Devils was doing. There's some competent and actually stellar direction and visuals in this episode, and it all comes down to a grand celebration of the show, just the start of a over-year-long celebration for the 60th, as well as a celebration for the BBC centenary. It is just a great episode. Not entirely perfect, but a great way for Jodie to go out. Easily the best regeneration story since Christopher Eccleston's, although not as good as that one. And this is coming from the same guy who said he liked The End of Time and The Time of the Doctor as well. But not Twice Upon a Time, that one can just suck balls. Okay, I've talked about Series 13 long enough. I think it's time to move on, because we've got 12 more series and seasons in this part and the next part of the ranking. Number 25. So moving on to number 25, and I'm sorry, Jodie Whittaker, I am so sorry, but you are going to become the second Doctor to have your entire era covered by this point in the video series. We haven't even got to some of the other Doctors started yet. We haven't got to William Hartnell, we haven't got to Patrick Troughton, haven't got to David Tennant. Obviously Chris Braxton's only got the one series, so I haven't got to him yet either. I haven't started on any of those 10 years yet, and I've already finished Colin Baker, and now I'm about to finish Jodie Whittaker, because number 25 is the strongest 13th Doctor series, Series 11 or Season 37. Yeah, I believe Series 11 is the 13th Doctor's strongest series, though not by too far, because Series 13 is right behind it on this ranking, as I mentioned. Oh, by the way, Series 13 is 2021, plus 2022 for the specials. This is 2018, 2019 for Resolution. But, yeah, Jodie Whittaker's first series is her strongest, and if I'm being honest, for the new series, a Doctor's strongest series seems to either be their first or their last, with the including the 9th Doctor, I guess, because he only had the one. So far for me, the strongest series for a Doctor has been either their first or their last. I will say first for 9, 11 and 13, and last for 10 and 12. We'll see how it happens for 15. This, by the way, is not going to be the case for all of Classic Who, although some of them do fall into that category, not all of them will. Also, if you had asked me after the release of Revolution of the Daleks, which of the two series is by that point, 11 or 12, I actually would have said 12. I think Series 12 was my preferred series after it came out, but after rewatching these series for the revisitation reviews, Series 11 was much better, in my opinion. I actually really enjoyed Series 11 more on the rewatches than I do on the original viewings. Apart from maybe Arachnes in the UK and Battlegrounds for Av Carlos, those two went down in opinion. But for the most part, I pretty much thought this was a very good series. Or at least attempting to be a very good series. Okay, it's still got its flaws, but it's working it out. It's finding its feet. It's like Series 8, but it's got slightly better scripts. It's like an improved Series 8, except without trying to be all dark and mysterious, and instead just recapture the magic of the show as best as it can. And whilst it didn't quite succeed, and later two series would probably fail at this even harder, it still tries to do something new and interesting. It's trying to be fresh, certainly earlier on. Maybe it kind of falls flat on its face as the era carries on, but Series 11 at least tries to be a bit different to what the Moffat era tried to be in places. I suppose in a way the Jodie Whittaker era is a bit like Series 10, where it starts out fresh and new and a bit different. Maybe a bit of stuff similar to what came before in the case of Series 10's first couple of episodes. Like there was still a bit of some of the old stuff kind of still feeling there, but it was trying to be all fresh and new. And I'll get back to Series 10 when we get to it. But Series 11 was trying to be something similar to that, and then Series 10 kind of changed its direction midway through with the Monk trilogy, and that's kind of what we got with the rest of the Whittaker era. So I'd say Series 10 and the Whittaker era have quite a bit in common in terms of trying to be fresh and new to begin with, but then change dramatically midway through. Well, maybe not too dramatically with Series 10, but, you know, it starts to be more catering to the status quo rather than the freshness. The Woman Who Fell to Earth is a very good start to the series. Ghost Monument, I can understand if a lot of people find that boring and dull, but there's some decent stuff in there and it's actually quite likeable. Rosa, oh god, that one is so good. It's very hard hitting and very, very tricky, difficult to watch, but it's so good. Also, if you are able to rewatch it, you might actually find some humour in there. That's what happened to me on what was admittedly my third viewing, because it was such a hard episode, I couldn't really rewatch it that often, as opposed to some of the other episodes, but despite it being one of the strongest. But on the viewing for the revisitation review, I actually found some funny moments in there. There was some good humour, so that at least balances out the hard-hitting scenes. Arachnids in the UK is the first episode I would say is not very good in this era. It's not that great, and Tsuranga Conundrum is still my least favourite. Okay, the people who say Ghost Monument is pretty much a nothing episode, I would probably say the same about Tsuranga Conundrum. That one is pretty much a nothing episode. I do like the Pating though. I'm probably one of the few people who actually likes the Pating. Demons of the Punjab is fantastic. That is amazing. So many great moments. I even think the aliens are necessary now. That opinion changed as well on the revisitation rewatch, as was the fact that Rosa went from my favourites to that one. Kablam is a fun, enjoyable episode, even though the politics are a little bit, okay. For all those people saying, ooh, Doctor Who is too left-wing politically now, they need to rewatch that episode. Witchfinder is also pretty damn good up until the reveal of the Morax, and then it goes downhill. We could have had 3 for 3 on an emotional, impactful, historical trio of historical episodes this series, but at the last 10 or so minutes it kind of blunders. It Takes Two Away is the episode I probably had the most opinion change of, as that one just went from another one I just didn't think was that great to one that I thought, okay, yeah, this one's actually pretty great for the most part. I mean, there's mostly a nothing story, but the emotional values is pretty damn great. So, okay, props for that. And then Battle of Kolos is not great. It's not that great. It's not. It's meh. Meh. Apparently Chris Chibnall just didn't have much time to write this one because he was helping everybody else out with their scripts, so he just did a first draft. Then it shows. Then again, so does most of Series 7 and 8, so... and 9, I think. So, yeah. And then Resolution is awesome. I mean, not the greatest episode of the era, but it's awesome. It's pretty awesome. There isn't really a proper series arc, but the character developments, apart from Yaz, because who hardly has much development in this series, don't worry, we'll get some in Series 12. But the character developments of Ryan and Graham is great, and the new 13th Doctor exploring the universe is quite great. A decent start for the only female Doctor's tenure. So far, I'm really hoping the 16th Doctor is also female. Yes, I'm pro-female Doctor. Also a fairly decent start to the Chris Chibnall era, and whilst it would go downhill after this series for the most part, besides a couple of fantastic episodes, but the Chibnall era still is a okay series regardless. I don't think it deserves all the hate it gets. I can see why people distract from it quite a bit, but overall, it's just a okay era. There's some fantastic episodes in there. There's some fucking terrible episodes in there, and there's some plain old, yeah, they're good episodes in there too. I recommend rewatching the whole era again. Maybe after the 60th specials have gone and Series 14 is underway, or if that's finished, maybe the Chibnall era could get a renaissance. A bit like Moffat and Capaldi got recently. Speaking of Moffat, but not Capaldi, so don't worry Series 10 fans, not yet. But speaking of Moffat, we now go back to one of his series. Number 24. As I said, it's not a Capaldi one, so it must be Matt Smith. And since I mentioned that my favourite Matt Smith series was his first, and that I've only covered his third so far, that means that only leaves Series 6, aka Season 32. Smith's second series and Stephen Moffat's second series. Now, I actually think this one's pretty damn good as well, like Series 11. Maybe slightly better than Series 11, though. I put this one above Series 11 because I think it is structurally stronger in terms of the stories and with the arc of the Doctor is going to die in the Amy pregnancy arcs. And whilst the Doctor is going to die's arc was already done with the specials, this time it was done in a bit of a different, shocking way. It's just a shame that, like the end of Flux or the Timeless Child arc, it has a bit of a disappointing payoff. Rewatching The Impossible Astronaut for its review and Dave the Moon's review, it was a really good episode. That was very good. That was very strong. That was just, wow, that was a great episode on its own. Dave the Moon, on the other hand, is a bit of a letdown. It wasn't so good. It was fine, but not as good. But Impossible Astronaut is definitely the stronger of those two episodes. Also, A Christmas Carol is a pretty fun Christmas special. Curse of the Black Spot is probably the first weak episode of the series. It's enjoyable, but not amazing. The Doctor's Wife is brilliant. The Rebel Flesh and the Almost People are not. In fact, Almost People is fucking shit. Rebel Flesh is a little bit better, but it's still associated with its second half, so fuck it. Good Man Goes to War is awesome. Let's Kill Hitler is definitely not. That is also pretty terrible. Night Terrors is fun, great, and quite spooky. Not perfect, but fun. Girl Who Waited, oh, that is another heart-wrenching episode. That is really good. And God Complex is another fun, enjoyable one as well. That's a really good one. Now, closing time. Now, this one is very unpopular. My take is the first 2/3 are fantastic. Yeah, it's Craig, played by James Corden, and that your opinion on the character and the story basically mainly comes with how much you can tolerate James Corden or how well you think the character is written. Oh, and if you can tolerate watching Gareth Roberts written episodes. But, for me, the character stuff between the Doctor and Craig, and Stormageddon Dark Lord of All, aka Alfie, was really good. That was really lovely and sweet. There was some great moments. And there was a few other cool moments as well with the Cybermat and the Cybermen. It was just a great episode. And it was lovely to see Linda Barron in a supporting role again. And then the final act comes round. And it's shit. It's absolute fucking garbage. In fact, it's probably one of the most fucking shit final acts of any Doctor Who episode, if not the worst. What the fuck? What happened here? What happened? And we were doing so well as well. This was a possible great episode, an underrated gem. A possible fantastic episode. And you ruin it. You ruin this otherwise crown jewel worthy episode. I mean, fair enough. Again, like I said, it's all personal opinion. Like, how can you stand James Corden? What's your opinion on Craig? Are you able to watch a Gareth Roberts written episode? Do you think what you're watching is interesting, etc., etc.? It's all personal opinion. For me, I thought the first 2/3 of this episode were fantastic. And then it's ruined by that final act that fucks with the Cybermen. It really does them dirty. And it does Cyberlord dirty. It even does Craig dirty to an extent. And the way that he's able to escape is not great. Either kill off Craig and make that what basically pushes the Doctor over the edge and accepts his death in the next episode, or don't kill Craig, or at least don't try to kill Craig. Don't make it look like you're going to do it, and then you go like, oh, not really. Oh my god, do it or don't. Don't give us this shit show. Or if you're going to do it, at least do it in a sensible way where that Craig's able to escape before conversion. Ugh. And it's just a lame conclusion of the episode anyway. The stuff leading into the next one is fine, but it's just a very lame... Well, that was written by Stephen Moffat anyway, so he was going to have that included at the end of the episode anyhow. But Gareth Roberts basically dropped the ball with this climax, and he was doing so well with the rest of it. Well, all I can say is, fucking turf. And yeah, Gareth Roberts being a turf and the quality of this episode, not really entirely connected apart from the fact he is one, but I gotta say something. So yeah. And I can't use fucking pandemic as an excuse this time because it's 10 years too early. Oh boy, what? Closing Time could have been one of the best episodes of Series 6, but it almost ended up being one of the worst. So it goes slap bang in the middle of my ranking of that series. And if that wasn't bad enough, The Wedding of Riversong was a pretty damn disappointing conclusion to the series. The first act, again, starts off really great. This is some of the best stuff of the series. And then, like with Closing Time 2/3 in, a third of the way into this episode, it goes downhill really quickly. The difference is, it's not as bad as that final third act as Closing Time. But the beginning also wasn't as good as those first 2/3 of Closing Time. It's also a very disappointing climax where the Doctor just reveals he escaped and didn't learn anything. It's pretty much a case of why did you bother in the first place then? The Tesseract is an interesting way of escape, but the character just doesn't seem to have learnt anything from the series. It would have been completely different if the Tesseract was the one that suggested it and the Doctor's like, "Ooh, I've got a good idea about that," as opposed to him just realising on the spot and he's like, actually thinking about it, and yeah, it just would have been better if the Doctor was ready to accept his death and then someone else said, actually, I've got a pretty damn good idea of how you could possibly escape death. That at least would have been respectable to the character journey of the series, and it would have made the reveal pretty damn great. But as we got it, it was a disappointing conclusion to the series. The story arcs themselves, again, are pretty decent throughout the runs, but like with Flux, it comes to a crashing end at the very end. But Series 6 is still pretty good. Number 23. So we've just had a couple of new series in a row. By the way, Series 6 was 2011 and 2010 for A Christmas Carol. So I think it's only right that we go through quite a few of the classic series seasons next that we haven't covered already. And this time we go back to the third Doctor's tenure for his third series, Season 9. Airing in 1972, Jon Pertwee's third season as the third Doctor, and also the most recent series to get a Blu-ray box set release. Season 9 is, again, a decent series. It's got some good stuff in there. I put this above the previous 3 new series ones because of the story arcs were good, but not entirely good, or at least, well, non-existent in Series 11, and some good character arcs in there. But, I don't know, Season 9 I just felt I think it was worth placing one place above Series 6. I did consider maybe putting this 24th in Series 6, 23rd, but I think this one maybe goes one place up a little. So I'm going to put this one here. I might change my mind next time I do this ranking. I might swap them round, but I think these two are pretty close. Dave the Daleks is a pretty great starter to the series, and Curse of Peladon is also very fun, and Sea Devils is great. It's the second half of the season that kind of lets it down a bit. Okay, I do like the Time Monster. I thought that was good, although I need to rewatch that. And Baby Benton stuff was shit. But it was a decent story. The Mutants is the only one that I'm not really that fond of, but I thought that was okay. It's a good anti-apartheid episode. It's just a shame this episode didn't catch on in South Africa at the time. Otherwise, they might have ended apartheid just under 20 years early. So, that's a shame. It's a good commentary on that, though. Although, I will say, an episode that is commentating on the apartheid and it names its one black character, Cotton. Ooh! Ooh, that's not good. That is not good. Heck, even if it wasn't commentating on the apartheid, it would not be good. It would definitely not. Oh, boy. Oh. Oh, that is just... I don't know if they intended it to be like that, but that does not give that episode good vibes. I think what Season 9 does best is the Doctor and Jo character interactions. The third Doctor and Jo have a really good character bounce off across their tenure. Season 8, it's a little bit rocky to begin with, of course, and then it kind of mellows together later on. Seasons 9 and 10, it is very strong. And that is probably what makes this season probably better than Series 6 at this point in time, in my opinion. I think it's probably that relationship together and those earlier stories being very good. Well, specifically Day and Sea Devils. So, overall, Season 9 is a pretty damn good series, and if you've got yourself the recent Season 9 Blu-ray box set, and you haven't rewatched any stories yet, that's probably worth checking out. Like I said, these two seasons could swap round easily on the next ranking, so they're very close to each other, but I thought I'd give Season 9 the edge of the preferredness, basically mainly because Series 6's story arc comes to a crashing conclusion. Otherwise that one probably would have been a little bit higher. Number 22. Moving on to number 22, and finally, we're into the 1960s! Yay! Oh, hang on, we're only at 22. Okay, that's not quite as good. But, okay, 60s time. That means it's Hartnell or Troughton. Who's it going to be? It's William Hartnell. And it is, of course, Season 3. William Hartnell's third and final full series as the First Doctor. And it's... well, it's interesting. It's, Season 3 is probably the weakest season of the 60s because there's so much and it's so all over the place. First of all, Galaxy 4 is quite fun for the most part. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's quite fun. Mission to the Unknown's a decent standalone episode. I recommend watching the UClan version because that is really good. Support those guys. Mythmakers is okay. Dalek's Master Plan is, for the most part, fantastic. It's just a shame they got Feast of fucking Stephen and Volcano in the middle. Although, I would still like those episodes to be found. Although, they are, especially with Feast of Stephen, least likely to be the ones to come back. If there was any copies still out there, which is very unlikely, they'd probably be the last ones. Certainly Feast of Stephen. Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve is also really great. The arc is a bit disappointing. It's quite clever that it does two sides of the story. Like 2 episodes is set in one period of time, and then 2 episodes later we jump to the future for a bit. That's really interesting. The Celestial Toymaker does a similar thing with each 4 episodes of its 4-part story, and it's a pretty fun, enjoyable episode. If rumours are true and Neil Patrick Harris is indeed playing the Toymaker, then it'll be great to see this character return, especially since they were going to bring him back for season 23, but we were robbed since the show was put on hiatus for 18 months. Fucking hiatus. The Gunfighters then follows, and that's just okay again. Then we get the Savages, which is also okay. And then we get the War Machines, which is fantastic, and is easily the best of the 4 stories of this season that's currently on DVD, which includes the animated Galaxy 4, by the way. Yeah, only 3 stories of this season survive in their entirety, and a 4th is partly animated, as there's only 1 surviving episode of that. There's also 3 surviving episodes of Master Plan, and 1 of Toymaker, plus the UCAN remake of Mission to the Unknown. So this season has some of the most missing stories and most missing episodes of any season of the show. However, thanks to the reconstructions by Loose Cannon, as well as the Galaxy 4 animation, and UClan's remake of Mission to the Unknown for their version of that story, we're able to recapture what the episodes would be like, apart from maybe moving images in the case of the reconstructions. But still, we're able to experience these stories, and we've still got the audio on CD, the soundtracks. But, yeah, Season 3 is just kind of a bit of a mixed bag compared to the first 2 and following 3 seasons, making it easily the weakest season of the 1960s. But it's still a pretty good one. I seriously highly recommend watching The War Machines, though. That is such a good one. Number 21. We go back to the Jon Pertwee era again for his third best season, and that for me is Season 8. Season 8 airing in 1971. Oh, by the way, Season 3 was set from 1965 to 66. Yep, that's right. Jon Pertwee's second season as the Third Doctor, and the second Third Doctor season to be released on Blu-ray. That's pretty cool. Then Season 9 was his third as well. Huh, interesting. Anyway, this is also the season that introduces Jo Grant, played by Katie Manning, Richard Franklin's Captain Mike Yates, who's not on this cover. He's on the back. Actually, I don't think so. And, of course, the Master, played by Roger Delgado in this season and the following 2 seasons, as well as many other actors further along down the line. But for the Third Doctor's era, Roger Delgado. And, in my opinion, he's also the best Master. Like, I mean, I love some of the others, but Roger Delgado. Roger fucking magnificent Delgado. He's just perfect. The Delgado Master is perfectly written and perfectly characterised. And that's as far as I'm going to go on with that, because I don't want to go on too much of another tangent. But yeah, but Season 8 is a pretty good series. Okay, Colony in Space is absolute garbage. That is terrible. That is easily Jon Pertwee's worst story. And Claws of Axos is alright. Tale of the Autons is very good. Mind of Evil and the Daemons are magnificent, especially the Daemons. That is just amazing. That is amazing. I know some people can't quite get into it, but I think that is a fantastic episode. The Doctor-Jo relationship is in its infancy here, and there's rocky patches throughout this season, especially in Terror of the Autons. But over time, it's going to get better, especially in seasons 9 and 10. But even here, in this season, it's gradually getting better. We also have the Third Doctor's continuing success and growth with UNIT, and with Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart and Sergeant Benton specifically, with the addition of Mike Yates making a trio of leading UNIT figures besides the Doctor and Jo. And for all of those who don't think Doctor Who was political before 2017, or 2015 or 2005, whenever you look at it, watch some Jon Pertwee episodes. Seriously, watch Jon Pertwee stories. Most of them are quite political. The most obvious example is the Green Death in Season 10, but we'll get to that. But, yeah, seriously, watch some Jon Pertwee. There's quite a lot of politics in the Jon Pertwee era. Overall, Season 8 is a pretty good series and has some really good merits to it. It's not as good as its predecessor series, but like when I talked about Season 11, this era has quite a bit of consistency throughout the whole lot. It's just that some seasons are not quite as good as others in this era. But I think the middle 3 are quite close to each other. So spoilers alert for when Season 10 is coming up. But yeah, I think the Pertwee era is very strongly consistent. And after quite a bit of stuff was introduced for Season 7, this is where more elements would be introduced and or ironed out and solidified for the next 3 seasons. Number 20. So we're into top 20 territory at last, and I think it's only fair that the number 20 spot, at time of this recording of there being 39 seasons prior to Series 14 and anything else coming out later down the line, I think out of the current 39 seasons at time of recording, I think it's only fair that the number 20 spot goes to the very first season of Doctor Who. Season 1. The very first season, the first to star William Hartnell as the First Doctor, airing from 1963 to 1964. This is the one that started it all. And it's great. It is great. Apart from Reign of Terror, I'm not really a fond fan of that one, and Sense of Rights isn't that great, but the rest of it is great. And The Ninth Child Episode 1 is a brilliant way to kick off the series. The pilot episode isn't as good, it's alright, but episode 1 itself is really good. The remaining 3 episodes aren't quite as great, and it would have been better if that was a separate story that just connected into it. And then you had An Unearthly Child as a single one-parter, and then maybe 1000 BC as a 3-parter. It can still be written by the same writer. We have many later examples of the same writer writing the next couple of episodes. But I suppose as the caveman plot is so tied in with the very first episode, it kind of makes this a 4-part story, so yeah, I guess. But it's still a decent 4-parter. It's just that the first episode is head over shoulders better than the other 3. The Daleks is a great start and great introduction to the Daleks, even if the first episode and the 5th and 6th episodes are very slow and kind of drag out the episode a little bit, but the 2nd through 4th and 7th episodes are great. And yeah, you can see why audiences got so attached to the Daleks when these episodes aired. Edge of Destruction is a very good 2-parter bottle story, and Marco Polo is also a very good historical adventure, though again, at 7 episodes, it does tend to take its time. Maybe these 2 could have been cut down to 6. Wrapping this up, we've got my favourite, The Keys of Marinus, which is a really interesting story and plays with its 6-part formula really well. It's written by Terry Nation, who wrote The Daleks, so makes a lot of sense why it's so good. And speaking of returning writers who wrote really good stories, the Marco Polo's John Lucarotti writes The Aztecs, which is the best historical story of the First Doctor's tenure. Overall, the first 6 stories of this season are really good, bar maybe a couple of episodes that don't quite work as well, or maybe are just there for add episodes to that story's run. The last 2 stories, as I mentioned, aren't quite as great. Sensor Rights is okay, but it loses its mystique after the 2nd episode, and I'm not a fan of The Reign of Terror, so that's me personally, but oh well. Oh, and the animated episodes 4 and 5 are the worst 2 animated missing Doctor Who episodes. Apart from Web of Fear Part 3, that one's even worse. But apart from that one, these are the worst 2. Before I move on, what makes this season really work is the character development of our 4 main leads. The First Doctor, Ian, Barbara and Susan, going from not trusting each other in the first episodes to being a family unit by the end of the season. It is so great. In fact, even by the end of Edge of Destruction, they pretty much had a great character development journey. Heck, they didn't even know if they were going to get more than 13 episodes out. So if they had ended it after 13 episodes, that would have been a pretty decent character arc for the four main characters. And then it carries on and they work off really well with each other until the final season. It's so great, and it carries on into season 2 really well as well. It's so good, and it's just great seeing these characters work off with each other. It's also interesting seeing that the Doctor is almost like a villain in his first 2 serials. It's basically like a secondary villain to the Cavemen and the Daleks in both those stories. But once the Daleks threaten to just wipe out the files with a nuclear bomb, that's when the Doctor we all know and love forms. He realises he can't just sit on the sidelines. He can't just be a selfish guy who travels around time-space as he likes, running away from home, and now he's kidnapped these 2 key teachers to keep the secret. He realises he can't sit on the sidelines and basically even be the one out of the moral high ground in places. He realises he has to be a hero. The Doctor, as we know and love, is formed thanks to the Daleks. Specifically episode 7. And from that point on, the rest is history. Season 1 is an extremely strong achievement in television. And whilst there's 19 seasons I put over this in the ranking, I think it's probably the strongest, or at least one of the strongest ones, in terms of getting the series going. Of course, it was the one that got the series going, but it is also a strong example of television being made, and probably the most important season of the show. Because it was the first. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne YouTube channel.